It was 4 o'clock in the morning when Sherlock Holmes woke me. I opened my eyes and saw him standing quietly at my bedroom door. Without saying a word, he walked toward me and handed me a piece of paper. It was a telegram. I quickly read the short message. "Third death at Alderton House. Come immediately if you are coming." The message was from Inspector Fell. I dressed as quickly as I could. Within a few minutes, Holmes and I were in a cab, traveling through the silent streets of London. The rain had recently stopped. The roads were wet, and the lamps reflected in the dark pavement. "What has happened?" I asked. Holmes looked out of the window. "Alderton House," he said. "A large home in Kensington. It belongs to Sir Walter Alderton, a retired diplomat. He is 72 years old. And 3 people have now died there." I stared at him. 3? In 6 weeks. Holmes continued calmly. "The first was a housemaid named Clara. She was 31 and had a weak heart. The second was Sir Walter's secretary, Mr. Price. He suffered from a serious lung condition. Both deaths were considered natural." "And the third?" Holmes turned toward me. "The third victim is Sir Walter himself." I felt a chill. "You mean all 3 died in the same house?" "Yes." "And all of them in their sleep?" "Yes." I thought for a moment. Perhaps it really is coincidence. They all had health problems. Holmes shook his head. "That is exactly what makes it interesting." He looked through the wet window again. 3 people, 1 house, 6 weeks, all dying quietly during the night. No struggle, no broken furniture, no signs of violence. He paused. "People expect death to be sudden. They do not expect murder to be patient." Soon the cab stopped outside Alderton House. It was an impressive 4-story building surrounded by iron railings. Every window seemed to be lit. The house looked beautiful from the outside, but there was something cold about it that morning. 2 tired police constables stood near the entrance. Inspector Fell met us inside. His face looked exhausted. "Holmes," he said, "I am glad you came." He led us upstairs without wasting time. Sir Walter was lying peacefully in his bed. At first glance, there was nothing suspicious about the room. The old man looked as though he were sleeping. His hands rested on the blanket. His eyes were closed. Beside the bed stood a glass of water. Nothing was broken. Nothing had been knocked over. The room was perfectly neat. "Who found him?" Holmes asked. "A woman named Mrs. Hearn," Fell replied. "She is his night nurse. She checks on him at 2 and 4 in the morning. At 4, she found him dead." "And who lives in the house?" Fell counted them carefully. "Mrs. Hearn, the nurse. Doris Lamb, the cook. She has worked here for 15 years. Sir Walter's nephew, Philip Alderton, who has been staying here for about a month, and a young footman named Samuel Cross. He started 8 weeks ago." Holmes immediately looked at the bedside table. The glass of water caught his attention. He picked it up carefully. He smelled it. Then he held it near the lamp and examined it. Finally, he placed it back. "Has anyone touched this room?" he asked. "No," Fell answered. "I made certain of it." Holmes walked toward the door. He examined the lock. Then he looked at the floor. He bent down. For several seconds, he said nothing. Finally, he spoke. "The floor has been swept recently." Fell looked surprised. Holmes pointed toward the area near the door. "Look at the dust. Someone disturbed it only a few hours ago." "But why would someone clean the floor now?" Holmes stood up. "That is precisely the question." He looked at me. "Someone entered this room after Sir Walter died." Fell frowned. Do you think the person was trying to remove evidence? I think someone wanted us to see nothing. Holmes then asked to see the room where Clara had died. Her room had been left almost untouched. It was small and simple. There was a bed, a chair, a table, a lamp, and another glass of water. Holmes went directly to the glass. He examined it carefully. Then he smiled faintly. The same pattern. What do you mean? I asked. The glass has been washed. But Clara died 6 weeks ago. Exactly. He looked around the empty room. Why would someone return to an unused bedroom weeks later and wash a glass? I had no answer. Holmes did. To remove something that had once been inside it. Our next conversation was with Samuel Cross. We found him in the kitchen. He was a young man, perhaps 25 years old. His face was thin, and his eyes moved quickly whenever Holmes asked a question. He looked frightened. Holmes noticed it immediately. How long have you worked here? 8 weeks, sir. And before Alderton House? Cross named 3 previous employers. He also had a letter of recommendation from his last employer. Holmes leaned forward. 3 people have died here since you arrived. Cross looked down. Yes, sir. Were you close to any of them? Clara was kind to me. She helped me when I first came. And Mr. Price? I hardly knew him. Sir Walter? He was fair to me. Holmes thanked him and left. Once we were in the corridor, I whispered, It must be Cross. Holmes did not answer immediately. He is hiding something, he finally said, but that does not mean he is a murderer. You think he is innocent? I think his fear is important. We then met Philip Alderton, Sir Walter's nephew. Philip appeared calm, almost too calm. He explained that he had been staying at the house for about a month to help his uncle with his affairs. Holmes asked about the previous deaths. Philip said he had been present when Clara died, but he had been away in Bristol when Price died. Everything about his answers seemed reasonable. When we left, Holmes remained silent. Then he suddenly stopped. I was wrong about Cross. You believe him? His fear is genuine. He has seen something, but he does not know how to deal with it. Then who? Holmes looked toward the staircase. Mrs. Hearn. We found the nurse sitting quietly with her hands folded. She had worked for Sir Walter for 2 years. She explained that she had checked on him at 2 in the morning. He had appeared completely normal. His breathing was regular. But when she returned at 4, he was dead. Holmes asked how long she believed he had been dead. At least 2 hours. That meant Sir Walter had probably died sometime between 2 and 4. And where were you during those 2 hours? In my room, at the end of the corridor. You sleep lightly. Yes. I would have heard anyone walking towards Sir Walter's room, she said. Holmes looked at her. Would you? She frowned. What do you mean? Suppose someone knew your routine. Suppose they knew you checked on Sir Walter at 2 and 4. Suppose they also knew exactly when you were sleeping most deeply. Mrs. Hearn became uncomfortable. Holmes continued. Someone swept the floor in Sir Walter's room after his death. That person had enough confidence to enter the room before you returned. He paused. Who knew your sleeping habits? She said nothing. Then Holmes noticed something else. He asked about sleeping medicine. Mrs. Hearn admitted that she used sleeping drops at night. Who knows about them? She hesitated. The cook. Doris Lamb? Yes. I asked her to buy them for me from the chemist. Holmes became very quiet. "Doris has access to the medicine cabinet, does she not?" Mrs. Hearn nodded. "She has kept the key for years. And she has been in this house during all 3 deaths." Mrs. Hearn looked troubled. "But Doris would never hurt Sir Walter. What would she gain if he died?" The nurse stared at him. Then she remembered something. "There is a provision in Sir Walter's household accounts." Holmes waited. "If the household is dissolved, the long-serving staff receive money." "How much?" "Doris has worked here for 15 years. Her payment would be considerable." Now the mystery was beginning to take shape. Holmes returned to Inspector Fell. They spoke privately for several minutes. Then Holmes devised a simple plan. He told Mrs. Hearn to let Doris know that something had been discovered in Sir Walter's water glass. It was a lie. Holmes had found no poison. There was no chemical test. There was no laboratory waiting for results. But Doris did not know that. The important thing was to see what she would do. Holmes claimed that the laboratory results would arrive before noon. Soon, the information reached Doris. At 11 o'clock, Doris calmly asked permission to go to the market. She said the household still needed food. Fell allowed her to leave, but he secretly sent a young constable to follow her. Doris walked to the market. She looked at vegetables. She touched a few items, but she bought nothing. Then she took another road home. The constable followed her the entire time. She never spoke to anyone. She never looked behind her. When she returned through the kitchen door, Holmes was waiting. Doris placed her empty basket on the table. "Nothing worth buying today," she said calmly. Holmes looked at her. "I imagine not." Then he gave her the final piece of information. The test results came back early. Doris froze slightly. There was a sleeping substance in the glass. There was no such result. Holmes was watching her face. Doris looked at him. Then she looked at the empty basket. "I want a lawyer," she said. At that moment, Holmes knew that his suspicion was probably correct. But there was a problem. He had no scientific proof. The glass contained nothing unusual. The only evidence was the disturbed floor, the washed glasses, Mrs. Hearn's sleeping medicine, and Doris's knowledge of the nurse's routine. It was not enough for a murder charge. Doris was taken to the police station for questioning. She refused to say anything more. Later that afternoon, she was released. She never returned to Alderton House. Holmes and I left the house as the rain began falling again. For some time, neither of us spoke. Finally, I said, "She knew the trap was a trap." Holmes nodded. "She realized we had no proof. Then she gets away with it?" "Not necessarily." He explained that Inspector Fell would examine the household accounts. The medicine cabinet records would be checked. The chemist who supplied the sleeping drops would be questioned. Perhaps those investigations would uncover the evidence Holmes needed. "And if they do not?" Holmes looked down at the wet pavement. For once, he had no immediate answer. After a few moments, he said quietly, 3 people died in that house." He looked back toward Alderton House. "A young housemaid, a secretary, and an old man." The rain continued to fall. Holmes placed his hands in his coat pockets. "Sometimes, Watson, the hardest mysteries are not the ones where the criminal disappears." He paused. "They are the ones where you know who did it, but cannot prove it." We continued walking through the gray London morning. Behind us, Alderton House stood silent and dark. From the outside, it looked peaceful. But Holmes knew that behind those walls, 3 people had died quietly in their beds, and somewhere inside that quiet house, a patient and careful murderer had almost succeeded.